Hey A&Pers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is A&P 1, Lab 1, Video 3. We're going to talk about planes and sections. If you're following along in your green booklet, for me this is the bottom of page 5. I might be working off an older version of the booklet though, so it should look like this. Okay, so a transverse section is going to be a cross section. So this will be horizontal. So like this cut right here is a transverse section. It is horizontal. What is horizontal? Horizontal is out where the sky meets the sea. It is on the horizon. So parallel to the horizon, like right here, and where her feet or legs are cut off, is a horizontal section, which is called a transverse section or a cross section. We're going for transverse section for technical terms here. The vertical sections, and all of these under here are vertical sections. Everything that's indented under vertical section is a vertical section, is everything that is not horizontal, but vertical is up and down. So the types of vertical sections are the sagittal sections. Sorry for moving around so much. The sagittal sections divide the body into left and right portions. So this right down the middle of our nose is a sagittal section. Oh, I forgot to say, a transverse section divides the body into superior and inferior portions. There are two types of sagittal sections. This section is a mid-sagittal section. Mid-sagittal section divides the body into equal left and right portions. A parasagittal section would divide the body into unequal left and right portions. So let's talk about these sections or cuts or planes. It can be a literal cut like you see on this model. More likely, we'd be talking about an image. The imaging technologies like CAT scans and MRIs show you a digital virtual slice of the body. And so if you needed a picture of the inside of a shoulder, a mid-sagittal section would not help you because mid-sagittally there is no shoulder. If you needed a picture of a shoulder, you would want a parasagittal section, and parasagittal divides the body in unequal left and right portions. The other type of vertical section is a frontal section, like this cut here, and that divides the body into superior and inferior portions. Frontal, also called coronal. And let's talk about cavities. First is the dorsal body cavity. The dorsal body cavity has two parts. First is the cranial cavity. The cranium is part of the cephalic region. The cranial region is literally just the brain case, the bones that enclose the brain. And then the spinal cavity is where the spinal cord lives in the spine and the vertebrae, in the vertebral column. The dorsal body cavity has a 3-layered membrane called meninges that we will come back to and learn in great detail in Lab 4 when we come back and talk about neuro. So the ventral body cavity is in the front. Remember, dorsal means back, ventral means front. The ventral body cavity is also in a word called the coelom. Ventral body cavity. It's not used as much anymore. We've pretty much switched to ventral body cavity. So the ventral body cavity has a number of regions in it. First is the thoracic cavity, and the thoracic cavity is largely described by wherever there are ribs, but it's also described by this muscle here. And this muscle here is called the diaphragm, and you need to know how to spell the word diaphragm correctly. And it is D-I-A-P-H-R-A-G-M. That's right. It has a sneaky, silent G that you need to know. Because if you skip the G on diaphragm, you look like you have no idea what you're talking about, and y'all know what you're talking about because you know that there's a sneaky silent G in the word diaphragm. If you can't remember where it goes, you can pronounce for spelling when no one can hear you and say diaphragm. Whatever it takes to get that G in there. So, sorry, I moved fast. Back to the model. From the diaphragm up, so superior to the diaphragm, is the thoracic body cavity. Oh, I forgot to grab tape. Poop. Inferior to the diaphragm is the abdominopelvic body cavity. So from the diaphragm all the way down is the abdominopelvic body cavity. You may recall the pelvic body cavity is described by the hips. So this is the hip, this will be the iliac crest, what I call the shelves where you hold the baby. And so this line from the diaphragm to the level of the top of the hips, this region, oops, I was looking at the model instead of looking at the picture of the model. So this area is the abdominal cavity, and then this region inside here in the pelvis is the pelvic body cavity. Okay, what else am I supposed to be telling you? Okay, in the thoracic body cavity, going back to our list, are organs. This one is a lung. Organs are on the other side of the room. Here's the other lung. Each lung is in a body cavity called a pleural cavity. In between the two lungs is an area called the mediastinum or mediastinum. And this is not a body region. This is a body region. The pleural cavities, left and right, are body regions because they each have a serous membrane that we haven't talked about yet. The mediastinum or mediastinum does not have a serous membrane, so it is not a body cavity, but it does have lots of important things. It has these great blood vessels, it has your trachea, it has your esophagus, and right here would be the heart. I couldn't find the heart for this model, so we don't have one today. The heart is in its own body cavity, which would be right here if we had one, and that is called the pericardial cavity. Oh, we haven't had the word root peri. We're moving back to the paper. Peri means around, like a periscope, helps you look around. And cardio means heart. There we go. Trying to move slowly so it's not nauseating. Okay, and then in the abdominopelvic region is the peritoneal cavity. The peritoneum is a membrane that takes up most of the peritoneal cavity, or most of the abdominal cavity, and maybe half of the pelvic cavity, and more about that. So then we need to talk about these serous membranes. The serous membranes each have two layers. The inner layer is the visceral layer, and that is touching the viscera. The viscera are your guts. Paper's squiggling around on me. Okay, so that will be the deep layer. The superficial layer will be the parietal layer. This is the outer layer. The visceral layer is a simple squamous epithelium, which effectively ends up being kind of just the surface of the organ. And the parietal layer is a superficial layer around that. If you have your book handy, there should be a picture of a fist in a water balloon. And that's what we're talking about here. The two layers are not different, they're not distinct. It's just that when you fold them, you make two different locations. So we name them trying to move slowly here, visceral layer for the inner layer and the parietal layer for the outer layer. And so each of these will have two layers, and I think I will go over that with you when I have the organs in hand and maybe grab a bag, so that will make more sense. Okay, so we're at a little over 10 minutes. So this has been Dr. Jones with A&P1 Lab 1 Video 3. Thank you as always for tuning in. The education must go on. Dr. J out.